Let's get salty!
Everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and today is a video I wanted to make for quite a long time. One of my big frustrations with current Hearthstone these days is just the design of certain cards that I feel like has been creeping up more and more. And this isn't about power creep and power level of cards just being absolutely insanely too good, too powerful compared to old ones. And yeah, that's pretty much true. That's a topic for another day. But this is more of just the design of cards, where one card just feels so unbelievably bad to face, whereas for the one player that's playing it, I guess it's fun. It's fun to do that type of thing, but it's very one-sided, and also just another aspect of the game that I want to talk about that just feels like cards that wouldn't have been made back in the day for very good reasons. And if you enjoy the content on the channel, if you like, I've earned your subscription, please hit that sub button down below. Give the video a like, it helps us out a lot. And the reason I've got Ticketus on the screen right now is it's not a modern card, I guess, anymore. It's from Dark Mood Fair, which, believe it or not, is like 4 years ago already. What is happening? But this was a very unpopular card, very polarizing card, because it would remove the top 5 cards from your opponent's deck. The downside of this card is it had to be corrupted, otherwise it would remove your own cards. So you had to play a 7 mana card or more, or discount this and play something more expensive. And it wasn't very good, and it was never in a top tier deck. But people hated this card so much. It was such a frustration because it's only really fun for the person playing it, right? Deleting those cards. It feels awful for anybody who wants to play the game, play their own strategy. But we have gotten to the point where cards like this, which are supposed to be more of a meme, more of a troll, are becoming more and more competitive. There's never been more of an example of this than the current game state, right? Boom Boss Thogran, the 8 mana legendary that's been changed so that you shuffle TNT into your opponent's deck rather than your own, which many have argued is a buff to the card. It doesn't change the core feeling of the card. This is one of the most hated cards in current Hearthstone right now because of its interaction. A particular brand, another card we'll talk about later that's really frustrating, is that you can't really do anything about it. Once these TNT are shuffled, you're going to not only have cards removed from your deck like Ticketus, you're going to have cards removed from your hand and minions or locations or whatever removed from the board. That is incredibly frustrating. And again, a card I don't think they would have ever made in like the first 6 years of Hearthstone. It's a card they would have completely strayed away from. If you watch yesterday's video, by the way, recommend it, really interesting, all these alpha stage cards, look at a card like the OG alpha state of Illidan, right? That card was changed very early on, before the game even got to beta, because it turns out that that card, where it like discards a bunch of cards, is not fun. That's not a fun interaction. Same with Mind Vision, stealing a card, not really fun. Something you don't really want in the game. And again, these type of cards were never made powerful until recently. Like another example, this card being made just a few years ago, Theotar, stealing a card from your opponent. This was 4 mana when it launched, and apparently in the early design phase was 3 mana. Sorry, Cora, I gotta throw that out there. But again, super frustrating for one person, pretty funny for the other. But cards like that are not very Hearthstone, at least in my opinion, at least classic style, more just middle-aged. It's more the recent trend of these cards that are absolutely infuriating, where you lose cards in your hand. There's not much you can do about it. You can go back to the older days, find cards like that that are healthier. Dirty Rat, right? This card's in standard right now as part of the core set. It's more that healthier flavor. It can only hit minions. Your opponent can try and play around it by holding extra minions, which is a valid strategy, which a lot of people do, and it gives a chance of counterplay, but at the same time allows your opponent to kind of manipulate it, kind of play around it. It was more of the healthier style, because counterplay, it's a very precarious thing at Hearthstone, is you can't act on your opponent's turn. It's really hard to balance. They tried a little bit with that funneled card Objection, one of the most loathed cards in Hearthstone. Again, another card I feel like they would have never made. It's not a coincidence that counter was an evergreen keyword that wasn't used forever until Blade Master Okani came around, but at least that was a legendary minion you could only play one of, unless you're priest and like raise deading it or resing it or whatever, but you could actually kill the minion. They could only randomly pick spell or minions as well. It was a lot more healthy. This card, you just played it, your opponent has to throw away a minion. They can't even play secret tech outside of Flare to play around this, and you can generate a bunch of them. It was super frustrating. We have talked a lot about that card. It's not like it stops there. It's funny how Ticketus was so loathed, but now we've kind of normalized that effect that Symphony of Sins, which has been a meta card in Warlock since it got buffed to 5, remove the top 6 cards from your opponent's deck, right? It's almost been normalized that, well, I guess this is okay now. That's the current state of the game, where this card does better than Ticketus for very little requirement. You can get this right out the gate for 5 mana. You don't get an 8/8 or anything, but still, again, one of those modern Hearthstone choices that I guess through conditioning of prior cards, this one isn't as talked about, but still a pretty frustrating thing. And it's just something we're seeing more and more, right? Benevolent Banker, another example. This one, at least you have to quick draw, but again, you just steal a spell, which again is super frustrating, especially you're playing like Rainbow DK and they take your Necrotic. It's one of those things that's not fun at all for one player. It's just really anti-fun. And I don't know, for me, Hearthstone, more of a minion-based game, more of a fun-spirited card game, fantastical, whimsical, right? We just have the Splendiferous Whizbag expansion, and we have all these cards that just feel like hateful cards that normally would have been very bad, very like, you know, you had to run really bad cards to do these things, are now like efficiently statted competitive cards. But speaking of minion-based combat, that's another part of modern Hearthstone that I find very frustrating. If I want to play a big minion or a big minion with a death rattle, it's basically impossible in today's Hearthstone. You just can't do it anymore. Use as an example, a card that probably would have been pretty good a few years ago, Dr. Stitch and So, where you get to discover a 5, 3, and 1 cost minion, and then Death Rattle, you summon all of them, right, in order. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool. Absolutely unplayable, because I want to go through all the examples of cards that punish you for playing minions that are in the current Hearthstone game, including a card like this or just any big statted minion. It's pretty alarming. Not all of them are competitive, but there are a ton of cards right now that outright punish you for playing minions. Minor example is Sleet Skater, where you play a minion, it gets frozen, your opponent gains armor, you basically, you know, lose that advantage. It's really frustrating, but lower on the, you know, frustrating scale, it's kind of more old schooly with, you know, Glacial Shard was 1 mana, just didn't give you armor. Not a big deal, but an example. If you play a lot of Arena, you will probably, or watch my Arena streams, you know, I am very frustrated by that. Anytime I play a big minion, I'm gonna get punished by it with all these origami cards that, again, don't see play on ladder, but I play like an 8/8. Well, I just gave my opponent an 8/8 Divine Shield with Lifesteal. Really frustrating experience. Like, I'm punished for playing the game, particular in Arena. You're really driven to play minion-based combat, and you're punished for it. It feels really, really bad, but again, hasn't really crept into the ladder metagame. However, that's not true with Reverberations, one of the most frustrating cards out there. When you play a Titan, well, it gets reverbed, and they get to use that Titan ability, remove my minion, and it's super frustrating. Same with Dr. Stitch and So. They get the copy of that Death Rattle. They get proactivity with like pinging it or transforming it, or back in the day with like the Colossals, they would get their extensions. One of the most loathed cards, complain about cards that's never been changed, and it's just another card where I can't really play a minion, and that actually goes for another mage spell, where again, I play a big minion with an effect. Well, they just copy it, freeze it, and that's super annoying, super frustrating. It makes it so that any big minion you ever play in the game right now is a liability. Priest got 2 cards that punish you for playing minions in the mini set. Funhouse Mirror. This was a legendary Soul Mirror effect, right? It hit the whole board, but now for 3 mana, I play a big minion. They can either just kill it for free or get value off of it, which is a mega frustrating. But then we have a card here that is one of my least favorite design cards in all of Hearthstone right now. Puppet Theater, 4 mana, choose an enemy minion, get a 1/1 copy of it that costs 1. Not only is this not removal, it's just pure hateful value. It purely relies on your opponent to play a powerful card, punish them for playing a powerful card and use it against them. It is not even, it's not a power outlier. It's not like the most OP card in the world, but it's just everything I don't like about current Hearthstone design. Punishing your opponent for playing their game, playing their strategy, and it's super competitive. It's a super, like, it is a good card. It's made Reno Priest viable, but like at what cost, right? It is just one of those cards that make you not want to play the game, at least for me. I mean, against an aggro deck, it's pretty useless, but that's also the frustration, how polarizing it is. But it's like the ultimate example of it, of these cards they make that are just so frustrating that there was no chance in hell they ever would have made these cards back in the day. Sure, they're trying to like enter new territory, I guess, right now. But again, it's like at what cost, what it does to the Hearthstone game, to me, I find it really frustrating. And I guess the last thing I will say that they have really leaned into lately, again, is really uninteractable minions. So let's look at Zilliax. Let's look at the virus module in particular. It has been a frustration since it's been introduced. When it had stealth, you couldn't interact with it. They doubled that attack. It was really annoying. They nerfed it, took the stealth off, but again, you can't kill this, you can't target it. And now with like the perfect module, it comes back with the Divine Shield and Lifesteal. Another whole level of frustration where unless you have a very specific answer, it's a card that's just really, really gonna irk you. And the same goes for game effects that you just can't interact with. So Bran, this gets played, you don't dirty rat it, you don't disrupt it somehow. For the rest of the game, their battle cries are active double. There is nothing you can do about it, which is very frustrating. Again, typically for the rest of the game effects, they have had to be balanced very carefully. And this one at 6 mana, now 8 mana, still incredibly strong. The same can be said for Odin as well, where that card, they get that online, you've basically lost the game. But the one that probably offends me the most, and probably not as talked about, is a card like Hell Yeah. Hell Yeah is one of these cards that bothers me because for 4 mana, just think about it, for just 4 mana with only 1 rune requirement, despite the weapon in Plague DK requiring 2 runes, for the rest of the game, you shuffle plagues into your opponent's deck infinitely. There's nothing you can do about it, especially with Steam Cleaner no longer in standard. I guess you could Tony King of Piracy it and all that, but overall, it's just one of those cards that has like no real requirement, no real counterplay. It's not super competitive at the moment. It has been at time. One of its main things is it was able to shut off Highlander stuff. But again, that was the anti-fun part of it. One player played Hell Yeah, the other person couldn't play their strategy. So they went back on that. At least there's that, but it's still super duper frustrating. And if you're a late game deck, you're punished, there's nothing you can do. And if you want to look at a comparable, how they made this card in the past, it existed basically. Hakar the Soul Flare. Compare these cards. 10 mana, 9/6 Death Rattle, shuffle a Corrupted Blood into each player's deck. When the blood is drawn, you then shuffle 2 copies of it. This minion costs 10 mana, horribly statted, not a battle cry, not a for the rest of the game effect, and it was actually somewhat competitive. There were like mill druids, I played a lot of it, like this miracle druid where you togwoggle and naturalize and make your opponent draw this stuff. This was the way they would design a card like this. They would make it real expensive, really hard to accomplish in a meme because they know this type of effect is really frustrating to face. And I just feel like Hearthstone's not learning from a lot of the lessons of the past of card design that just really frustrates a large subset of the player base and leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth. And I see it more complained about than ever. And I will leave off on the one card, again, that falls under this criteria that I call a necessary evil right now, but it's outright broken. It's super frustrating if you're playing a board-based deck, especially Death Rattle deck, a deck that punishes you from playing your strategy. Reno Lone Ranger. Poofing everything. There's no counterplay to this anymore because of the unfun nature of something like a Hell Yeah. So one bad thing leads to another, you could argue bad thing. Again, I think it was the right call, but it's like, again, what's the better of the evils? It's just the way modern Hearthstone design is, and it's frustrating than a card like Reno Lone Rangers, what props up later base decks, but it's just as problematic if you look at it as anything else. It completely negates your board. If you're a Plague or Resurrect deck, you can't resurrect those minions, and then you can't develop the turn after. All these modern design cards just leave such a sour taste in the mouth of like every player, it feels like, whether they're board based or combo based. The modern design of Hearthstone just feels so punishing to one side of the board, more so than I've ever seen in the game. And it's just one of the reasons why, at least when I play ladder, which I don't play nearly as much as I used to, I'm really frustrated, kind of stressed out, and like anxiety ridden. And I'm not even talking about infinite value. I'm not talking about power level, power creep, all these other cards. This is purely design on cards that could just be really, really frustrating to so many people. And I hope that maybe they could get away from this, start going back to just playing a minion that does something on the board really cool and doesn't F with my opponent constantly or punish them for playing the game. But right now, that's kind of the state we're in, and I don't necessarily love it. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below how you feel about all these cards. There's like a million examples you can mention that I didn't talk about, or if you like this style and this is the way Hearthstone should evolve, and you know, things change over time and you just gotta deal with it, you grumpy old man who's getting a little bit of gray in their hair. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.